Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. I'm your host, Maxwell Baumbach, and this is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. And we're going to spend a lot of time in sleeper territory today. And for that, there's nobody better than Garrett Johnson. Garrett, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm sure the Midwest is already in the middle of winter, but Seattle here is getting its first really wintry day, and I'm all bundled up. If you see me shivering on the podcast, don't judge.
It's
I'm dying
not
over here.
terrible today. It's like 45-ish. And we got out winter clothes and stuff for my daughter who doesn't understand that she does not need that many layers yet. So she's been trying to wear snow boots and a hat and mittens, and it's 50. You're fine. we actually should not put you in that right now.
Yeah, we haven't turned the heat on yet, and I woke up and I looked at my phone. It's 35. It's ooh, I made a mistake.
Yeah, we've avoided that. I think the later part of this week is when we're finally inching into that territory. So thankfully it hasn't been bad. I know Metcalf had a ton of snow around Halloween. We've been lucky in the Chicagoland area. I'll take what we've gotten so far.
Sounds like it.
But while the weather outside may be cooling down, college basketball is heating up. Had to squeeze that one in there. So we've got a couple of guys that we want to talk about today. A really kind of odd and eccentric mix of players. There's some themes too we're going to discuss, but I mean we've got old prospects that have one dimension to their game. We have a young, well-rounded guard. It's a fun mix. So let's start with Jase Richardson from Michigan State, who is a player that we had talked about a little bit going into the week. He was one of those guys where Michigan State I have a hard time watching them play. So he was not the highest priority to me out of the gate. And then you brought him up, and then obviously Champions Classic. Thought he looked good there, and then I just sort of dove into the film. Kind of one of the more interesting unsung freshmen in this class. So a 6'3" guard out of Michigan State. Can you just give people a little bit of background on him, and then why you were kind of interested in him coming into the year, whereas I'm sort of playing catch up with him?
Yeah, so he's the son of Jason Richardson, as we know from the NBA. I personally had a couple people mention his name to me. I'd already kind of had my eye on him from his high school stats, which kind of popped. It was public school stats, but I mean he was very successful there. His AAU tape popped to me, so I had him on kind of a under the radar freshman list to just check in on really quickly. And then the first game just popped so much that I immediately turned it on, and then I've actually watched every Michigan State game now up to this point because I'm very interested. I think the first thing that I would point out with him is that his athleticism really pops, and the activity that he has really pops offensively. He's sprinting around the court the whole time. When you are as fast as he is, you want to see someone like that covering the most ground of anyone on the court. Right away, you don't want to see them having to get motivated to run around and look for touches. He's looking for touches actively and executing Izzo's scheme really effectively. So if you're a freshman that's in Izzo's scheme day one, that's a huge compliment. Izzo, I think the reputation that Izzo doesn't play freshman is incorrect, but he is very selective about which freshman he plays. And Jase is playing right away, real minutes, just short of starter minutes. He's coming off the bench. I think for me, I also really like the open floor handle and the burst, the foot speed that I already mentioned, and he can get to the rim really easily. He's using a lot of screens, but as you do, but he can do it on his own. But he could do it on his own. He has a couple attempts. I need to see. I feel that Kansas game was just so ugly overall. It's hard to take a whole lot from that one in terms of the fact that he didn't get to the rim a lot. But as we start to see more major conference opponents, I want to see how often he's doing it, because the foot speed would suggest that he can, and his handle is really effective.
Yeah, those were two of the things that jumped out to me. I thought were the footwork, the ability to create separation for himself, and then just maximizing what he has. When we're talking about a guard, and he's 6'3", so it's not like we're talking about a guy who's 5'10", where it's oh no, he has to do so much to overcome this size. So that's an acceptable size for a guard. but you still want to see them kind of maximizing every single gift and trait that they have. And I feel like that was the biggest thing that popped to me with Jase is like, it's big strides after he creates that separation and he has that space to get downhill. And even like on his finishes, just like making sure he gets the most extension on his arm possible. Like every inch of his body is being put to the best use possible at all times, it feels like with him. And that was like one of the first things that I took note of. Because like when I'm early in my process on a guy, like I try not to get too specific or like hone in on like really like I try not to be too declarative about like what skills this player doesn't have. Because like on a certain game, a guy may have better control over his handle. The defensive scheme may make it easier to get away with certain things than against other teams. But I really thought just like it was really obvious that he has like a sort of this physical mastery over how he uses his body to create and sustain him.
Yeah, I think to me, it's like you mentioned that first step is really great. And the fact that he's able to like hit those top speeds and still like adjust his finish at the rim depending on the contest is to me like a really notable thing, especially for someone that young. You know, you can figure that out over time with more craft, learn, you know, off the court. But he's already coming out of the gates running, and he's had some really nice finishes over like really veteran rim protection. You know, mid-major rim protection, but still the point stands. And to me, I think, you know, in terms of being a freshman, he does have like a freshman body though. He is 185 pounds. But he doesn't look like he is going to be a naturally skinny, smaller guy. So like if you think defensively, there's not a whole lot of eval here in terms of like him being like a really high level defender, but I think he's a smart defender and he's got really active hands. In particular, he just like knows where to be to like disrupt people. So he gets his stuff in, you know, on the defensive end to the point where you're not feeling like it's a total loss there. But he's going to need to get a little bit stronger, at least in the NBA level. But you know, that any guard can get a little bit stronger.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. I do think at the same time, though, again, like I feel like a lot of the positive physical traits still show up. Like I think his like first lateral step is pretty good. He moves so that way. And like I love guys that are like springy when they contest off the floor. Like when they get up really well to contest a shot without having to like really load up or like really anticipate that the shot is coming. But it's just that effortless lift off the floor on jumper contest. Like that's something I see out of him. And that stuff is encouraging. Like the body stuff I can live with when it's a younger player. And like I'm, you know, more I have more of a belief in them getting their body right and filling out their frame over time. Where if like if he's a graduate, you know, maybe then it's like a little bit different. Like, like I've watched some older players this week where I'm like, man, this guy's like still physically not where I need him to be. And if I'm a front office, and I'm taking somebody that's physically less developed, I'd rather just take a younger guy. But yeah, I think his overall feel, to your point, is good as far as like knowing where to be. And I think that shows up on offense too with his passing. Like I really liked what I saw as far as his decision-making goes. And I loved how fluid he was able to stay as an operator. Like nothing felt that I've seen so far has felt really predetermined. And there's been a couple plays where he'll either get deep into the paint or get to the rim and see something and still have like the wherewithal, the floor mapping and everything like that to say, okay, look, I'm going to spray it out here. I'm going to make this dump off pass, or I'm going to adjust in this way. And do it in a way that's still like seamless, doesn't slow down the offense. He doesn't have to pick up his dribble. He doesn't like force something at the rim because he can't read the floor. Like none of that has been an issue too, which I think is super encouraging because again, the game can slow down for guys, but I think the smaller you get, the more I want to see that stuff immediately. And I was really pleased with his decision-making sort of on the fly and on the go, like driving toward the basket.
Yeah, I think if I were to like put what you just said in a sentence, he's playing within the Izzo offense, but making reads outside of it. And to me, that's really encouraging. Like he really looks like a point guard. I think Michigan State has a lot of those like quick bursty guards. They tend to really like those, but like Jase is one of the first like Michigan State guards in a minute where I feel like I'm seeing him make his own reads within a complex offense.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So with Jase, and I guess with like even the team structure at Michigan State, do you see him taking on an even bigger role as the season progresses? Because like one of the big things that I worried about with this team going into the year is it felt like they lacked a guy, and like part of the, like I covered like Frankie Fiddler for No Stone Unturned, and part of the reason for it was like I just didn't feel like this team had a guy that could both score and pass. And I was like, maybe Frankie Fiddler, like maybe that could be him. And now, like through a couple of games, I'm like, I think that might just be Jase. Like Jaden Akins has been a little better with that sort of thing, but like Jase is tied with him in assists, and like Jeremiah Fears is there, but like Jeremy Fears like hasn't really shot the three much at all. Like doesn't really have that same scoring punch. Where to me, it's like I understand why Izzo likes Jeremy Fears within the context of this college offense. Like this is a super reliable, trustworthy guard. But I don't know. To me, it's like I feel like maybe the ceiling of this team is a bit higher if we turn the reins over to Jay sooner rather than later.
I do think they really like the idea, if I were to guess, of him being a sixth man in the sense of like tiring out the starting unit a little bit, then he comes out just racing. So he might keep that role the whole year, but I definitely think those minutes are going up. Like he just provides such a lift to the team whenever he's on the floor. Like the offense just looks different when he plays. And to me, that's someone that you can't keep off the floor. So yeah, I think his role will increase with time. Like I think he needs to have more plays drawn up for him because he tends to really do well when it happens. I'm not that knowledgeable, I would say, yet, and need to do more research on his shot, like his kind of precedent as a shooter in high school. Because right now the shot looks pretty solid, but going back to like kind of like the freshman level strength, it does seem like his mechanics are impacted a little bit by him being kind of a slighter build. That like I'm not worried about it for him as a prospect, but like right now he might not be able to like handle like a really heavy shot load. Those kind of like shots off like heavy movement are kind of to the couple I've seen have been pretty rough. So if he's just mostly a catch and shoot guy or like a quick dribble pull up guy, I don't know how much more volume you can take on. So it's like kind of that balance. You know, Fears isn't taking many threes either, so it's not like you knock Jase for that when Fears also doesn't. But to me, I think they're going to run three guards all year. I just hope that Jase minutes start going up quickly. Because to me, I don't know how you're feeling. I'm thinking maybe first round from what I'm seeing so far.
I am so early in my process with him that I don't want to get like.
I know it's like making those kind of declarations in November is crazy, but like to me, like he's going to be on that watch list when I start building it out.
Yeah, so I had an initial board, and like my approach has been with the amount of work I do on returners in the offseason for the site, like. My approach this year with a lot of the incoming freshmen was like watch everybody who is on like a mainstream board or that I've heard like really positive stuff about behind the scenes. And I didn't really get much of the Jase stuff until like the last minute, as far as like, oh, the season starts tomorrow. By the way, Jase Richardson might be a first round guy. And I was like, whoa, well, hold on. Like, okay. So I'm still like very behind on like his prep. Like I've watched very little of his pre-college film with an eye to him. Like I think I've probably seen games with him on the court, but not with like my intent being like I'm watching him every second of the game. So I'm still like so, and like we've talked about this privately. Like I'm so gun shy with guards that like for me, I'm still just like multi-year. But I'm open to the idea of it because I think the processing is really good. I like what I'm seeing defensively. I'm interested to see where the shot settles in. I think if he shoots it, I'd be more amenable to it, but his overall like process, decision making, how well he moves, things like that, I'm really encouraged by. My gut says if you like had to put a gun to my head, my guess is probably more second for me at this point, but I'm open to the idea of first. I definitely don't want to slam the book on it.
Yeah, I think if the shot doesn't like kind of immediately arrive, we could be looking at a 2-year player. But I think for now, I'm like bullish on the shot being pretty solid throughout the year. And to me, with that being like the main question mark, I'm very excited to see where he ends up on my final year board.
Yeah, I am too. I love what I've seen just as far as the overall decision making and like athleticism movement. Let's go to somebody who's sort of like polar opposite and Koby Brea, who I'm going to be writing about for the site. This podcast will be out Monday. So by the time you're listening, this article is probably up at noceilingsnba.com. Make sure you're subscribed over there. And Koby Brea is very interesting. So he played 4 years at Dayton. He's now at Kentucky. So far this year, he's averaging like 15.3 points per game. So like he's scoring a lot. The thing with Brea is the shot. He's a shooter. Like 44.4% from three over his college career on 11.9 attempts per game. Last year, 49.8% from three on 12.9 attempts. I'm sorry, that's per 100 possessions, 11.9. And then 12.9 attempts per 100 possessions last year. Exceedingly high percentage, really good volume, and listed at 6'7". Is he probably 6'5"? I would say so. That would be my guess based on just looking at him on a basketball court. But Brea is sort of this singularly excellent shooter who's also had like good assist to turnover marks throughout his career. Like he can run a little bit of ball screen stuff. Like doesn't really get downhill very much, but like when he does, he sees the floor. Like he keeps his eyes up. Athletically, I would say like very behind the curve as far as like lateral agility, strength, ground coverage, like okay rebounder, but like always had low usage rates too, just because like he can't do a whole lot. And then it's like, all right, well, if the defense like doesn't look great and his usage is even high, like what are we working with there? So very like, I hate to say like one trick pony because I think like the decision making is good. And if you have one trick, being a 49% 3-point shooter is a pretty damn good one.
No.
Yeah, I'm just perplexed by this man. So what have been your thoughts on Koby Brea? And then I'll kind of get into what some of my research turned up.
Well, I think I saw a tweet first of all from I think Evan Maya. I could be misremembering, where he projected every college player's 3-point percentage coming into the year.
Yeah.
And Koby Brea was at multiple percentage points above any other player in college ball.
Yeah.
Like any other player. That was crazy to me. Just like tells you like how insane last year was a debut.
Yeah.
This is the kind of player I have the most trouble evaluating. Pretty much of any archetype. It's one of the ones that I'm still trying to solve, and it's the guy where like, with no disrespect to the rest of the game, shooting is 90% of the sell. It's just because the shooting is so good. I mean, like the shooting has to be first and foremost everything that's talked about. And like you try to figure out when I'm trying to figure out which guy who's like this elite shooter can do enough elsewhere. It's tough because it ends up being this is one of the archetypes that's like most team context heavy out there. Like if the team that selects him is just like, oh yeah, you're just gonna come off the bench, just hit some shots. It's like, no, that's not gonna work. If you have to like draw stuff up for him to get his shots because the rest of the game isn't gonna carry him. So for me, it's like, how do I gauge this guy on just kind of like my own objective level? Because you look at like an Isaiah Joe, for example.
Sure.
Look how Philly just kind of like
Had nothing for him.
Didn't do anything for him. He was a standout in camp his last year, and they even cut him because they just like hadn't really tried to creatively think of how to get him involved. And he goes to Oklahoma City, and just they immediately start trying to use him like to his strengths. And you know, he's immediately like a very, very valuable player in this league. So
yeah, and it's tricky too because then people are like, this guy could be like Isaiah Joe, and it's like there's one Isaiah Joe. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where it's like this is not common, and it's like, does that almost like in some ways, like if you believe in it, then it becomes like inherently valuable. That it's like this is a very difficult thing to find.
Right. That's the other thing, is that, you know, ultimately like it's easy for me to evaluate like, oh, he's a really good shooter. If he takes threes, that's good for the offense. Like, I'm not saying that's the part that's difficult to evaluate. To me, it's like there are only so many spots for this in the league. So how is he like one of the best in it? And like how else does he contribute so that if he ends up in a spot where they aren't just like funneling him threes, that he can like stick around and like stay relevant? And to me, with Koby Brea, it's like it's one of the more challenging sells for me outside of the shooting. But then the shooting is also so obviously like really good too.
Yeah,
it's like, I don't know. I'm probably gonna spend the whole draft cycle thinking about this.
Here are the guys since 2008 who are over 6'5" that made 200 threes over their college career and shot over 44%. It's Koby Brea and Doug McDermott.
That's insane.
That's it. Like that's it. Like the guys that shoot that well and that often are usually like tiny. And like obviously like for McDermott, it's like, well, McDermott was like so much more complete. He rebounded, like he was doing far more inside the arc. He had a bigger usage burden. It's like, yeah, but then like it's also kind of wild that Koby Brea had like such little usage and still hit that many threes. Like there's another, I don't know, way to look at that makes it even more impressive, I think, in a sense. It's bizarre. So I keep these like spreadsheets of guys that have stuck in the league in like, I don't know, like 2016-ish onward to try to keep it as modern as possible. And then like I categorize by like bottom 20% in this stat, like middle, like lower middle 20%, middle 20%, upper middle 20%, like the elite 20%, like by statistical category. So like using the bottom 20% as red flags, just in terms of like, just like a few of the categories where Brea had red flags were that he has a usage rate below 20, which you don't see very often over his college career, and like in his pre-draft season specifically. Shoots below 50% at the rim, had less than 5 dunks in his final college season, had steal and block rates combined to be less than 2.5, and had a DBPM below 1.5 during his last season. Like all of this stuff is not good. But there are exceptions that like guys that like have those similar red flags in a couple areas, like Gary Trent Jr. was bad at a lot of that stuff. Luke Kennard, Sam Merrill, who came to the league even older than Brea will. But like I couldn't find anybody that had all of those red flags. Like a lot of those guys had some of them, but like all of those problem areas stacked on top of each other just makes it like even more mind bending. That it's like, okay, he's gonna have to like really overcome a lot. Because even like Jalen Wells has been like living rent free in my head in the sense that it's like, man, like if you can just really shoot the ball, you can play. And like Jalen Wells like struggled at a lot of the same stuff that we're talking about. But like I would even say Jalen Wells had like a lot more shit to him and like way more stuff off the dribble and was like a considerably better athlete than Koby Brea. And then knock on Jalen Wells was like, he's not super strong. He grew late, so he's still growing into his body. Like the athletic stuff isn't awesome. And like considerably more comfortable with him than Brea in those senses. And
I'm with you on that on Wells. Like it to me, Wells is a better prospect for sure. And I thought that pre-draft as well, but at the same time, I was way too low on Wells, I think.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, to me, like the thing with Brea also, if you go back to the Dayton tape last year, Dayton didn't really have a reliable point guard last year. They kind of had a point guard by committee.
Yes,
and in many ways,
they had for a few years, yeah.
And in many ways, Deron Holmes was a point guard at times.
In crunch time, he was bringing the ball
in terms of like commanding the offense.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's a red flag a bit that Brea was not taking on more responsibility in that offense in the sense that like they needed someone to do it. Deron that whole year needed someone to help him out. And I think Brea was extremely positive for that offense, but in terms of like taking on some of this other side stuff that like Jalen Wells can do and already could do at Washington State, it's like that gives me some pause.
And I even think the year before that too, where it was like all the point guards were injured and it was like Tumani Kamara was there, so it was like more like high-low stuff with him and Duran. It was more Shraf Jamps like getting involved. Like it was more that, but like even then, like same thing where it was just like, wow, we sure need somebody to do stuff with the ball in their hands and like be able to create a paint touch. And like just was not. He wasn't up to that. And in the article I linked to a different article by Boris Barrick where he talked about like guys who've stuck off a two-way contract, and like so many of them had high usage rates in college, like the hefty majority. And it's like you really need to be able to do more so much of the time and then scale it down. Or with Brea, it's like you just got to hope and pray that the one thing erases everything else.
Yeah, I'm trying to see. The other thing for me with him is, he took 200 threes last year, but he only took about 45 mid-range shots.
Yeah.
Like if you think about one differentiator between him and Wells is that Wells was very active in the mid-range as well. You think of like a Sam Hauser, for example, is another guy that we're kind of talking about here. Sam Hauser was extremely active in the mid-range in his last year at Virginia. Like to be scoring at exclusively one level right now, I don't know. To me, I'm not going to say he's not a mid-range shooter. I just because sometimes scheme just tells you not to do it.
Yeah.
But like I need to see it.
Sure. Although I will say a lot of his like footwork against a hard closeout is predicated on going to the side. So it's a
Right.
lot more like focused on staying behind the arc in terms of like how he hunts his shot when he is chased off the line. It's more like, what else can I get in this same vicinity rather than like going inward. But yeah, it is bizarre. And I think the thing is Hauser has like massive strength advantage over him, going to measure a lot better than Brea
Yeah, no
will.
doubt.
And I think also like, again, just like so much more juice is a passer. Like,
Yeah.
and like Brea is like a fine hot potato decision maker, but like I posted a video of his assists and like, they're fine. Like they're really basic, solid reads that he makes, but it's not exciting. And maybe it doesn't need to be. Like maybe he's going to come into the NBA and hit 50% of his threes every year, and you can just play him for 10 minutes a game and he doesn't get you killed. And like, that's a really nice plug and play skill set to have off the bench. I think where it gets fascinating is like on draft night when the field weeds out like it does every year now, and a billion guys go back to school because the NIL money is so good. Like, is there a team in the second round that's going to be like, we're just going to swing on this one skill? Like personally, I feel like my inclination is more like I would say my draft philosophy in general is more geared toward like, let's try to get future playoff contributors on the cheap, even if it's like a lower
Yes.
percentage outcome. Because like at a certain point, and like I mentioned in this article, at a certain point in the draft, you are swinging at low percentage outcomes. Like there just aren't statistically likely prospects to work out on the board a lot of the time once you get to a certain point. So you have to take a cut at something. And I do wonder if a team is just going to be like, we can use this and it's cheap. And like, we'd rather have this and like try to develop some guy.
Yeah.
Like I think that's possible. Like Blake Hinson got a 2-way. He got cut right away though. And then like Alex Dukas got one. Again, like both those guys were stronger than Brea. I'd say they both moved better than Brea. But like guys who really bomb threes tend to at least get a 2-way. The last question I'll ask you on him is like, if you ran an NBA team and I said you have to give some sort of contract to Koby Brea, what do you feel comfortable with? Would you feel comfortable like first round guarantee, second round, like non-guarantee multi-year, draft him in a 2-way, undrafted 2-way, E10, summer league? Like what are we talking here?
To me, because usually like guys that I really love are still there in the second round.
Sure, yeah.
I would say it's a pretty confident 2-way for me.
Okay.
Just because I'm sure there will be other guys that'd be more interested in prioritizing for the exactly
Yeah.
the reasons you're talking about, like taking those lower swings. And at some point, I would be saying, I have 3 2-ways and I can get a guy who can I know he can put up like 5 or 6 threes off the bench. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
can throw that guy into a lineup every once in a while and then try to develop him in the G League to get maybe something else out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that to me would be the mindset.
That's where I'd feel most comfortable with him as well currently. And I think, I would probably be the undrafted 2-way versus using capital on it. Like it'd be more like, let's just see if he's there. And then if no one picks him up, then we'll try. But yeah, that's Koby Brea. So I've got a full in-depth article on him coming out Monday. So make sure you guys check that out. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk about a recent video that Garrett made. Stick with us. All right, Garrett. So on your YouTube channel, you recently put out a video talking about identifying up transfer prospects, guys who are to mid-major that made the leap to high major and then were drafted to the NBA. Some really interesting research in that column. First off, just plug your stuff, let everybody know where to find it, and then talk about the piece that you did and what your findings were.
Yeah, so I post all of my links to my videos on Twitter and Blue Sky at Half Awake Takes, but my YouTube channel is called Garrett Johnson Scouting. And I'm really just getting this channel started. I kind of had like a trial run video with a scouting report last year. Really liked that process. So I'm planning to come out with like maybe one really in-depth video a month. Like we're talking about videos that I spend countless hours on. These are labors of love here. Not here for the views, here for the effort. And I came out with this video, I think it's a couple weeks ago now, about transfer portal guys from the mid-major ranks. So this is right up your alley, right?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
I think Max and I have bonded over the fact that we both spend our summers watching a lot of mid-major players.
Mhm.
And to me, I wanted to start trying to see if now that we're a few years into the portal, if there's some like trends that we can start observing with the guys who are successful like right away in a draft sense. Because
Mhm.
there are so many guys who are successful in a team context, but who
Yeah.
who is making their mark on the NBA right away? So I just, without really any prior preconceived notions, I just pulled all that data in. So there's 5 guys who have been drafted within 1 year of going up from mid-major to major ranks. Maybe I should say that again. There's 5 guys who have gone from the mid-major ranks up to major
Mhm.
conference ranks and have been selected in that same year. There's a much larger data set of guys who have taken 2 years or more
Mhm.
to get
Sure.
drafted. And ultimately, that 2 year pool is way more like diverse and like unique. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of like special cases, and I don't think there's a lot of like uniformity. But that group of guys, the 5 guys who have actually gone in 1 year, there's a lot in common between all of them, and that's kind of what I got into in the video.
Mhm. Yeah. So what were like the most common traits among this group, and then who was the guy that kind of hit those thresholds? That somebody that you kind of did the research on and really gravitated towards.
Yeah, so my process first was to kind of create like a rough statistical model to follow when I'm like trying to find players to watch, because if you use the model I created for the 2 year pool, it creates 2 year guys or 2 year or more. The
Hmm.
pool is around like 150 to 200 names. That's impossible. Can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there was a much more manageable list of about 20 guys who made that leap up and in 1 year. And to me, the first thing that you have to point out is size.
Hmm.
Every player listed 6'6" or above uh, in this grouping. So you think of guys like Jake LaRavia, you think of Tari Eason, Trey Murphy,
Hmm.
Jalen Wells. Kind of interesting case there. I had to kind of figure
Hmm.
out how to weigh that coming from D2.
Yeah.
And Dalton Connect is the really obvious one from
Hmm.
last year. Probably the craziest case of all of them, really.
Hmm.
So all of them are 6'6" or above. And then it's kind of like more generally like trait-based statistical. I will say like statistical like trackers here. There aren't any like really high marks. It's more like, can you do a little bit of everything?
Okay.
So it's,
Hmm.
or at least at the mid-major ranks. Like
Sure. 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 Yes.
at a
Yeah.
lower level of competition, you need to basically be showing that you can do a little bit of everything, and then maybe some of those things fall away in your draft year when you move up a level. But
Hmm.
like you've shown that there's a foundation. So it's usually like athletic indicators are really important there. Just the fact that you're taking threes at all is very important. And just in general, like you have to have had some sort of like impact metric that says like you are a positive player on the court.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so there were a blend of a few there that I
Hmm.
used, and yeah, it came back with 20 names, so I watched all of them, and then that's
Hmm.
what bore out this video.
For sure.
So Igor Milicic Jr. for Tennessee was the name that really popped for me, and I know that we're
Mhm.
both a fan and that we've been kind of
Yeah.
tracking his early season, uh,
Yeah.
which has been kind of a roller coaster.
Yeah. The Montana game was great.
Yeah,
Hopefully it's more of that.
so that Montana game felt to me like a very different game from the first two.
Mhm.
Um, And in that sense, I will say I've watched a couple Rick Barnes press conferences, one before the season, one during, and he's basically talked about how Igor played at Virginia and then 2 years at Charlotte, where
Mhm.
there was a system in place from a former Virginia assistant.
Mhm.
So they play slow,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
slow. And
Mhm.
3 years of that is an adjustment period to jump up to even Tennessee, which isn't one of the very fastest, but they play
Mhm.
faster. And he was really struggling with that. Like it seemed like he didn't want to take threes early in the shot clock early in this in those first couple
Mhm.
games. It seemed like he wanted to kind of like keep the ball moving and find the best shot at the end of the shot clock, which is just not what that offense is calling for. It's like
Yeah.
the
It's
offense
not good
says if you're open,
basketball.
shoot it.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's 6'10" and
Mhm.
is a very high level shooter. I can highly endorse that as like a signature skill. And at 6'10", that is so much of a mismatch in the college level. He should just be launching.
Mhm.
And he wasn't. And I am very excited now that in this Montana game, he was launching. And
Mhm.
he was making quick cuts,
Yes. Yeah.
like 1-2 dribble moves and then making a decision, and I really
Mhm.
liked that. I also just liked in general that he seemed to be playing with a lot more energy and like
Yes. Yeah.
was moving a lot quicker.
Mhm.
So to me, that Montana game was like, okay, this might be something getting unlocked here because Tennessee needs that go-to guy.
They do.
I think they have quietly one of the best perimeter offenses in the country in terms of like guys who can shoot, but they
Mhm.
need that guy who can just kind of take over, so that those guys can get open. And to me, Igor on paper is the guy who's the best, has the best chance of doing that. So it's definitely going to be something I'm tracking. And to me, it's a guy that like right now, if you were to ask me after these 3 games if I'm like really enthused about him as a draft prospect, I'd say off just those 3 games, I wouldn't have thought much. But
Sure.
off the priors and like seeing the development now in game 3, I'm really excited again.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I started to like poop my pants a little bit after the first 2 games. So I was like,
Yeah.
man, like foul trouble, like looking a little tentative. Like, what is this? But yeah, if he gets back to launching, I think we're fine.
What about Money Williams in that game? I know you watched
Whew,
it.
yeah, money is interesting. I want to just see like more like overall consistency. Like he's been a little turnover prone at times. He can force stuff as a passer. The shot, I buy. Like it wasn't great percentage wise from 3 last year, but like the free throw percentage is really high. The shot diet was tough. Um, Man, I like how he can manipulate a defense. Like really strong, good handle, good counter game, good speed changes. Like there's so much to like about him that I think with everything he's gone through off the court. For those who don't know, he lost both of his parents in the last year. Um, it is incredible that he's like out there at all. But the improvement that he seems to be making just in terms of like his all around skill set and like he's playing himself into shape and dropped 30 on 15 shots against Tennessee. Like that is impressive. I'm super excited to see where he goes the rest of this year, but also just like the multi-year trajectory of him is things can kind of settle down and allow him to get more of a foundational base than what he had kind of coming into this season.
Yeah, and for those who are interested, there is a GoFundMe out there
Yep.
for Money Williams if you want to look that up. I think it would be very helpful for him and his siblings.
Yep. I'll link it
Um,
in the podcast description
yeah,
too. Mhm.
30 points against Tennessee. I mean, this was a slow start
On
to the
15
season.
shots.
He had a slow start to the season that we can totally understand. But
Mhm.
to go from that to this is crazy.
Mhm.
30 points. Like to me, he's always been a dribble drive playmaker who like balances the two. I didn't know he could turn it on like this to get 30. I didn't have him pegged as a 30-point
Yeah.
score type guy. And
You might be
that
like,
like he's not per game going to be doing that. This isn't going to be a
no.
every game thing, but like to know that's in his like range of outcomes for him in a game is like alters my feelings a little bit. It makes me like open my eyes and say, okay, I should take a closer look throughout the season at this
Yeah.
and not just kind of assume that he's going to have to transfer up before he can make his mark.
Yeah. I'm super excited to see where he goes the rest of the year. Um, was there anybody that came up for you data wise that you were a little bit more skeptical of after going through the tape?
Skeptical of. Um, I wouldn't say that anyone. I kind of didn't go in with like expectations of who would pop up in the filters. I guess when I was looking at mid-major to major conference transitions,
Mm-hmm.
I will say that there were guys who, when I watched the tape, I kind of flagged when otherwise their like numbers say they should definitely be on my list. One of them is Case and Pryor
Okay. Yeah.
at Louisville. He transferred up from South Florida. To
Mm-hmm.
me, it's more like it's some contextualization here of like his journey up to this point of like kind of like he started in JUCO, played well, no, he started in Division 1
At
for a year
Boise
at
State.
Boise State,
Yeah.
went down to JUCO for I believe 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
went up to South Florida, played really well, but with some caveats I'll mention in a second. And then now he's at Louisville and posted some really nice performances early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, However, at South Florida, I did feel like watching the tape that he had a very short leash with the coach, and he got pulled off the floor very quickly for to me, some like
Mm-hmm.
judgment errors. I will say, like, just particularly defensively, but also sometimes in like shot selection. Um, this is a guy who's 6'10" and has like excellent movement skills. Like
Yeah.
that to me is most of like the first part of the sell. And
Hmm.
it's like he can really flow easily into like this really flowy, covers a lot of ground dribble pull up in the mid range. He can also like do kind of like one quick dribble moves off 1 foot from three, and
Hmm.
like it looks believable. Um, but with that ability, he needs to know when to use it, and sometimes he can take some kind of ill-advised shots. I also think defensively, you can tell there's a lot of intentionality from him and trying to be impactful, but I think there's a lot of technique stuff that he needs to like get coached up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not stuff that's like a fundamental athletic issue where I don't think he can salvage this. It's more like you need to like make sure the rim is covered when you come out to the perimeter. That's like a big thing for him. And just make sure that you aren't selling out too hard on a read that you think you're making. Uh,
Hmm.
so for me, with the amount of defensive errors there, I didn't end up including him on my main list in the video, but he was still someone I mentioned at the end as a guy who could end up being the guy to go drafted this year.
Yeah, I quite like Pryor. I
Yeah,
know that like he does get a little wild at times. And like I kind of understood the yanking him thing like a lot because it's like he has a lot of ball skills for a dude who's 6'10. And then like he'll choose to use them in the strangest ways where it'll be like, man, like he can really create stuff off the dribble. And then that will lead to like him taking a 15-foot shot after dribbling 4 times where like the guy is just smothering him, or like he'll like drive into traffic and like miss an open read. But then when he does like lean into his passing vision, he can make really good passes. Like the skill set is great. It just needs a lot of refinement with him. And he is going to be like 24 and a half, I think, on draft nights. Like he is an
that's
older
another
dude
thing.
as
Yeah,
well. Like, so with him, it's a lot trickier, but I feel like the raw production on both sides of the ball and the things that an NBA team cares about, as far as like defensive playmaking, rebounding, ability to pass, and shooting threes, because he shot like 40% from three down the stretch, like over the second half of last season. Like, if he could just do that and be 6'9", like that's great. Like, I actually love that in the second round if that's what he's going to be. But yeah, the age complicates it. And like that's a guy that I'm going to be kind of paying closer attention to than a lot of guys as like a graduate, just because I think there is potential for him to be a tremendous value play if he does take those strides.
yeah. If he's on a two-way, I think I'm like 100% in on that of like
Yeah,
trying to unlock something there. I will also say at six, I think I neglected to mention at 6'9" last year, he was bringing the ball up for the offense for South
Mm-hmm.
Florida for like a first place team in conference. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was a team that was trying to win. It wasn't just trying to showcase their talent. Like
Mm-hmm.
he was bringing up the ball for them. So at 6'9", that's pretty notable. They had guys who are at the major conference ranks throughout this roster now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, to me, it's like just kind of like if I'm trying to predict him getting drafted, it's a little bit more tentative for me. But in
Sure.
terms of getting an NBA opportunity, I'm all for it.
Yeah. I think a lot of times I love that just like raw overall framework, even in the older prospects, where it's just like, hey, a lot of this with size can end up being super valuable. Is there anyone else that stuck out from those videos that you really like or took a liking to?
I think JT Toppin was the guy who like the model said, "Duh," including
Okay.
him.
Yeah.
And
What do you think about
now
JT?
his Texas, I have not seen Texas Tech yet,
Okay.
so I have only received good things from people who have watched.
Hmm.
Um, I think in terms of like, I will reiterate kind of with this video, I was predicting
Hmm.
who gets drafted, not necessarily who I like.
Sure.
So some of the names that I mentioned, I'm kind of like, in the video I do mention some of my questions, but I think all of them are ultimately for guys that I believe in as guys who can get drafted. And JT Toppin is a guy who I need a little bit more time to think about. Because to me, I think there's a lot of similarities in terms of like narrative that could build around him to what Duran was doing. Duran Holmes, second time mentioned in the video, in his sophomore year, where to me he was very obviously a prospect in that year, and should have been drafted in the first round a year prior to where he actually was selected, and it was because the defense was just so elite. And JT Toppin, I wouldn't call him an elite defender, but I think he's a really promising defender, especially with a guy who can kind of move back and forth to the 4 and the 5, depending on what the defense needs. And he's 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, like really great block rate, and you can see it on the tape that he's got really great instincts for shot blocking. A guy who can come out to the perimeter too and show, which to me is really encouraging. He has active hands on the perimeter too. To me, it's the reason I brought up the narrative similarities is that I still don't think JT Toppin's taking enough threes right now.
I agree.
And, I don't believe in his mechanics as strongly as I did Duran's. And to me, that's, I think, part of the reason he's taking fewer threes is that probably the practice reps aren't supporting taking that many more threes. But I think if we look at the precedent for Duran of what NBA teams told him and him deciding to go back to school, I think JT might be told the same thing this year unless he's looking utterly dominant, which again, I haven't looked at the film yet, but the numbers suggest he's been pretty
Yeah.
damn good.
It's one of those things where like he's obviously like a very different type of player than Colin Murray-Boyles, especially like physically. Like they just look very different. But it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, the production is just undeniable. And like when guys are that productive at a young age, it's like, well, I don't want to put that guy too low. Like I don't want to feel like an idiot and like bet against a guy who's 20 and awesome. Like it's really hard. But yeah, like I wish he was on the perimeter more just in general too, because I'd like to see what his ball skills look like out there too. Because last year when he was at New Mexico, it was just like a lot of Donovan Dent, a lot of Jalen House, a lot of Jamal Mashburn Jr. Like it was a lot of those guys on the ball. And like, look, for Donovan Dent, that was good. For Jalen House, that was good. Jamal Mashburn Jr., no comment. But that was rude. He just didn't set up the rest of the team the way the first two guys did. So I liked that he was transferring a lot. And like, I love Texas Tech as a program. Like, I think they do a really good job there. Guys get better there. But it was also like, oh no, you're on a team with too many good passers again. Like, it's like, oh no, Darren Williams. Oh no, Christian Anderson. Like, oh no, like what do you
Elijah Hawkins.
Yeah, Elijah Hawkins, who like led the nation in assists, at least at a point during the season last year. Like, there's so many good guys that it's like, I can't tell Texas Tech, like, in my right mind to give this man the ball more and like let him cook. But like, I feel like I just have such a poor gauge on like what the shot actually is. And like mechanically, I have my concerns about it, as you do as well. But also just like, can you dribble? Like, how good of decisions do you make? Like when you have to make them on the perimeter consistently? Like, I truly don't know. But every time I watch a game, I'm like, wow, that guy's a winner. And it's not just because he has like 20 points and 10 rebounds. It's the way that he's going about it. Like the way his fingerprints are always all over the game. He hustles, he plays hard. Like I like him and I think he's good. I just have so many questions about like how this role scales.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% there.
So we're going to do one more break. And then on the other side, we're going to talk about two draft Sicko prospects who both, I believe, played at the JUCO level. It's last year. That are absolute hoopers, just pure bucket getters. So stick with us. It's going to be a good time. So we are going to lead off with the player that you brought to the table here, Anthony Roy, at Green Bay. Which, like, first off, Green Bay, like, I kind of want to give credit to Doug Gottlieb. I know a lot of people like killed the hire, and I've not like scrutinized the tape, but I will give Doug Gottlieb credit for just recognizing that 6'5" senior Anthony Roy is awesome and just being like, go do it, young man. Like, go make it happen. Like, kudos to him for that. Anthony Roy, give us kind of the background on Anthony Roy and then what you are seeing from him on the tape.
Yeah, first off, I want to shout out James Cahoot on Twitter for passing this name along to me. It's been very fun digging into this tape because like Roy is a legit NBA prospect, like legit. I have probably not been more stunned by someone's tape relative to my expectations so far in this early season. For context, Anthony Roy is like a 6'5", 6'6" guard who has kind of bounced back and forth between Division I and JUCO for reasons you can look up. Intel is got some stuff there. I will say that without going too far into it.
Sure.
But he was at San Francisco for a second. He was at New Mexico State for a second. Dropped down to JUCO twice. This year at Green Bay, through 3 games, he's averaging 29 points per game, shooting 56% from 3 on very high volume.
10.7 per game. Not per 100, per game.
Yeah, and he dropped 27 on Oklahoma State in the opener. It's not just him beating up on, Division twos and the like. It's all against D1 comp, and he did it against Oklahoma State. This is crazy production through 3 games. And if Anthony Roy shoots anything close to what he's done in the first 3 games, and the tape supports that he will, I don't think there'll be much argument about which prospect in this class has the best highlight tape of deep threes in the class.
So my journey with him was this guy was very much not on my radar. And then you were I was oh, he's a sicko guy that you want to talk about. And you brought up Anthony Roy. And I'm just all right, this guy's scored a lot of points. What's the deal? And I popped on the tape, and early in the year, it's hard to find good sicko prospects because the data lot is really small. So you can't be I'm gonna run a bar query on BPM 3-point percentage and steal rate and just find somebody that's fine. There's no way to do that this early without really going through a lot of work. And oh my God. I was anticipating a guy just hitting a lot of shots. I was not anticipating a guy creating the shots in the way that this guy was. The absolute bag that he gets into to get separation east-west, backwards, the ability to break his man down off the dribble and get inside. I was not prepared for it. And the shot is so good. And he shot over the course of his career between D1 and JUCO, he's at 45.4% from 3. So this is not a case of well, he's usually a 29% shooter and he hit a bunch of them. The data says he can really shoot. And the range is absurd. He was pulling up from genuine logo, not Missouri State where the bear logo takes up the whole court logo, actual logo range. And yeah, I was absolutely mesmerized by the shot making.
He has no conscience. He gets so much oomph on his shot just naturally from his strength, and his flow of his mechanics is just so repeatable. He can launch from anywhere, and he's totally unafraid to do it. And to me, his athleticism really pops his NBA level as well, as a guy who on the ball can really has some of that twitch to him where he can create some space for himself off of kind of body fakes and the like the handle works. And I actually think the playmaking is really solid. Normally when we talk about guys like this that are just pouring in baskets at this rate at the mid-major level, you turn on the tape and don't expect to see them looking to pass very often because of how they've been coached to play. And he's actually still playing within the offense. These are shots within the offense for the most part, or at least in terms of what he's been enabled to do. And then he's still looking to pass and create for others. And I actually think the passing ideas are pretty good, and the passing touch is pretty good. So we're looking at a player who is actually still embracing the other parts of the game while putting up 29 points a game. And that to me was maybe the part of this that was most exciting to me of okay, this isn't the guy who has to be coached up on everything else. This is a guy who already understands what he's supposed to be doing in this offense.
Yeah. And I think I'm with you on the passing vision. I thought it was really solid overall. I'm even just the types of deliveries he's doing is the kind of stuff that you want to see from a guy where it's dribbling with my right hand, help comes from the strong side corner. I'm just pushing it out with my right hand. Very simple that. Yep. That's exactly how we're supposed to do it. And then defensively, I thought it's fine, but it's a guy who's scoring 29 points per game, the college defense, it is what it is. But I did think he looked really good wingspan wise too. I thought his arms looked super long. So I'd imagine he's probably going to measure well.
Really good communicator. Really good communicator.
Yes, yeah. Points without pushing guys into spots, which I always love.
Yeah, the defense, they're clearly trying to hide him defensively in the sense of you're carrying the offense. We don't want to use you too much on this end. But he's still really active mentally on the defensive side in terms of this is a weird micro skill thing, but he's a top 1% pointer defensively in terms of like pointing out where
Yeah,
guys are
yeah.
supposed to go and who's covering who and like identifying switches. Like he's doing that the whole time. And I really love that he's like trying to find ways to still be impactful defensively, even though he's standing off on the wing. Like,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I think he's really good. I think where teams settle with the background stuff is going to determine like what that looks like as far as an NBA future goes. But talent wise, like very impressive, and like one of those guys too, where like I always like when small conferences have like a guy that I can point to that I know is really good. So it's like, all right, if someone else in the Horizon League pops, I know I can watch them play this team and just see how they handle one other like NBA-ish tier guy on the floor.
Yeah.
Like I think that's always really helpful. So yeah, great shot on him. Love the talent there. The guy I brought up is sort of in a similar vein. He's the guy I've talked about a little bit on the podcast before. Amar Augillard at Fresno State. He was at Triton Community College before the season, which is like right down the road from me. Bounce back guy. From what I understand, intel-wise, like nothing wrong. He went to high school around here. He went to a good school, and I believe was like academic, like all like had like really good grades and stuff like that. Was like an academic, like all conference kind of kid in high school. Played at Georgia Southern, didn't really work out. Goes to Triton, and then he scored like I think it was like 25 a game at Triton. But he had like a 63 true shooting percentage, and he shot 7.5 threes per game and made 42.5% of them. And through 2 games at Fresno State, they're bringing him off the bench. He's played 20 minutes, and he's scoring 25.5 points per game. He is also not hitting threes right now. He's 31.6% from 3. And again, like he hit 42% on ridiculous volume last year. He can pull up with it. The release is super functional. He gets it off really fast. He can pull up, he can shoot off movement. Like I love the shot. The reason he's scoring so efficiently is he's getting the free throw line 8 times per game in 20 minutes per game. So he is at a 66.1 true shooting again. He's really big. Like he's bulky at like 6'4-ish. He's listed at 6'5. I guess he's probably closer to 6'4, but like sort of a Desmond Bain adjacent body in terms of just being really thick. Yeah, and like the passing stuff again, I think is okay. It's been better at Fresno State than it was at Triton, but I'm still like I've watched a lot of the Triton tape, and I'm just kind of like there's some games where he's just not really looking to pass, but it's hard to look to pass when you have like a 64 true shooting percentage. So he gets buckets. The defense is interesting. I'll let you talk about that a little bit. But yeah, I just see a dude with like an NBA frame who like when he's locked in can cover ground really well. Awesome, absurd balance, like good footwork. And I'm just like, man, like this guy can really hoop, and like maybe you just refine it a little bit and like really key in on like getting him above board or like just able to swim on defense, and you have like a great microwave scorer. What are your takes on Augillard so far?
Yeah, my first note was something you already mentioned. 51 points in 40 minutes to start the year.
Yeah.
Coming off the bench, like this is a guy who when he gets his touches, he's looking to score, but he's not just like throwing it up there.
Yeah,
like they're good shots for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I think like sometimes there are better shots, but I think his shots are still by and large good, and he's getting to the line. Like they have him shooting off pin downs, you know, like they're getting him involved, and it's not clearly like part of their game plan. So to me, that's very exciting for him. I honestly wasn't. I didn't. You had mentioned him to me before we watched him, and hadn't gotten a chance to see him yet. And I was very pleasantly surprised by the tape. Like I really liked the scoring package. I don't have a lot of defensive notes for the same reason that you brought it up. Like it doesn't seem like a priority for his tape, so it wasn't for my notes. But you know, you'd have to unpack that. Is it the same thing at Triton? Is that a similar theme at Triton?
It's a little better at Fresno than it was at Triton. At Triton, it was just like he would be places on the court where I'm like, how did you end up here? Like it was like, whoa, like almost like mind bending at times. At Fresno, it's been better. It's like there's still some issues. I think there is just like a general sort of lack of discipline. Like he's really easy to get off his feet. Like just a lot of like stuff that I think with a degree of like focus could be better. And I think the other thing is that he will like play strangely narrow at times, and that can make him a little bit easier to get by than he should be. But I think that when he wants to, like the best stuff at Triton was like when he'd be on the ball and he'd just like throw his body on somebody. It's really hard to get him off. The other thing I like is like he can cover ground well. Like he can get from point A to point B pretty quickly. It's just a matter of like, is he going to display any level of discipline or thought on the closeout, or is he just like flying by on somebody you don't need to fly by on, or is he just going to like sort of, slow down as he gets towards them and then let them beat him off the dribble? Like that needs to be an area of focus. But again, like the frame is there, he can move. And the other thing is too, he's like pretty flexible. Like I was really surprised like how well he did get around certain screens when he was involved in ball screen actions that I'm like, okay, like I think there are enough blocks here that you can tell me it gets to a point where the offense can make up for it. Like I think that is a potential outcome.
Yeah, and this goes back to why coaches always preach practicing good habits, because it's really tough to go from what you're describing at Triton to immediately coming in and like trying defensively and it actually working, because if you don't have the habits there, then it's a lot of growth that you have to make in a short amount of time. And despite any intentionality, that you're not going to get there. Like it's not going to be a quick 1 year turnaround. So for guys like that, I like that I'm hearing that you think there are some positive notes there that he can work off of, but it might be a multi-year process. Yeah. So to me, it's like if you're in JUCO right now and you're not trying defensively, please put in the effort.
Start
It's
trying.
like,
Yeah.
It's not, you're not going to be able to just turn it on when you want to.
Yeah. Well, like in Tumar's credit, like Triton went to like the finals in the national tour and like the championship tournament, JUCO. Like he was the dude on one of the best teams in the country. And that's like another reason why I liked him coming into the year. Is like, I just think there are not that many guys that can score like this. I think to your point, it's probably best for it to be a 2-year process. I think it's probably best for this to be the first year of like acclimation of like actually playing on a Division I team, get used to the responsibility of that. And then next year we really blow it out and kind of hone everything in. But just as far as like pure production out of the gate, I really like what I'm seeing out of him.
Yeah. Unlike Anthony Roy, who this is the year he graduates this year, runs out eligibility. Augillard has two years to work with here. So he has time.
Absolutely. So we're gonna wrap it up there. Garrett, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you on social media and kind of follow along with the work that you're doing? Because the YouTube video that you made, again, everybody go check that out in full. I'll link that in the description as well. Cannot recommend that enough. Where can people find everything you're doing?
Yeah, YouTube is Garrett Johnson Scouting. You can find that also on my Twitter account and Blue Sky account, which I just created. I'll start posting on both. And that's at Half Awake Takes or Garrett Johnson. You can look up either one.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at Boundboards. I'm also on Blue Sky as well. No Ceilings is on Blue Sky. Follow us over there also. NoCeilingsNBA.com. Subscribe for our daily written content. No Ceilings Plus subscribers get a bonus section to my column every single week this year, in addition to the other bonus columns I'm going to start. It's going to be Spreadsheet Sleeper season coming up soon. So get over to No Ceilings Plus as soon as possible. $5 a month gets you access to everything over there. And we will be back next week with Draft Sickos, but we're here on the podcast feed every single day with the rest of the No Ceilings crew. So subscribe. We will see you again soon.